Green Zone, powered by Minard Steadfast Homes.
Good evening, Saskatchewan. Welcome to the Green Zone. It is Jamie and I and Glen Suitor here on the Green Zone, and let's get it started with the semifinal in the coolest job ever, and no better place to start than the big news of the day in Rider Nation. The Saskatchewan Roughriders have traded offensive lineman Matthew O'Donnell, who they picked up last year in the second round of the Canadian draft, to Edmonton for receiver Greg Carr. The Riders also gave up a fourth-round pick. The Eskimos give up a fifth-round pick in the deal. Here is our next contestant. Jason Knox is with us as we break down this trade. What do you think, Jason?
Loved it. Loved it from the get-go. The thing about Greg Carr is he's such a big body on the outside, and I think the Saskatchewan Roughriders could really use that big body. You know, I think we've been looking for it ever since Matt Dominguez decided to hang him up. And at 6'6", 215 pounds, he's out of Florida State. He's used to a high-flying offense. He could really help Darien down the road a little bit. And in the case of O'Donnell, he just came off as a guy who never was ever going to play here. He tried out basketball. He tried out for the Celtics. He was in camp with the Cincinnati Bengals for a couple of years. Made the final cut, or didn't make final cuts, I guess, this year. And finally, I think, you know, by the way it sounds, is Brendan Taman just... It was time to fish or cut bait, and he decided to get something for him while he could. And they got Greg Carr. Now, the only thing about Greg Carr is the only time we really saw him this year, as far as the Rider fans are concerned, he was up against Chris McKenzie in Commonwealth and had the size advantage and everything, but didn't make some crucial catches. So you want him to maybe tighten that up a little bit, but from the outside, the way I look at it, I'd love to see Greg Carr in town. That's just another weapon for at Darien's disposal.
For me, it was Matthew O'Donnell, I think, burnt some bridges last year in that negotiation with Jeremy O'Day, because Jeremy O'Day was kind of handling the negotiation with Matthew O'Donnell, and they burnt his bridge, Glen. But at least the Riders, if you're looking at it from that perspective, get a player for someone they didn't think may not be here.
Well, yeah, I guess there is that. I'm going to disagree with both you guys, though. I'm not sure I like this trade for the Riders, and excuse me, here's why, is that whenever you trade a Canadian, and a Canadian that could potentially be a very good football player, especially in the O-line, you know, generally speaking, would like to get a quarterback for him. I mean, if you're going to trade Canadians away, then and the possibility of quality Canadians away, then you need to get a quarterback back. And if you're trading an American for Canadian, because let's be honest, the draft picks are just swapped basically. So this is a trade, a Canadian offensive lineman at 6'9", 340 out of Comox, BC. That if he is that talented basketball-wise, has tremendous feet and the potential to be a very good football player, and if that's the case, you're getting an American receiver for a possible, 10-year football player on your O-line. So I get it if he wasn't going to play there because of other reasons, and that there could definitely be something to that part of the story. But just from the outside looking in, it's one I actually don't like for the Riders.
What do you think, Jason?
Well, I agree with your assessment, Glenn, but the way I'm looking at it is I don't think Brendan Taman would have made this deal if he thought that he was going to come into town and he would be able to get signed to a contract and get on the team and make a little waves here on the O-line. The way I look at it is, like I said, Taman had his hands tied and was just trying to get something that could help the club right now, and that looks like the type of deal that he worked out here.
Yeah. You know what, Jamie? That's that could be very well true because Joe Mack went through a little bit of that with Brendan Labatt and the fact that he wanted to play in Saskatchewan. Although Doug Brown, his former teammate, wrote a different story that he may have stayed in Winnipeg. But there is something to be said for when a player has made it clear that it's not a first choice to play in Saskatchewan, and you can get something from him or for him. I would say that's a good move, but I just don't like the offensive lineman. He's obviously a good football player to be on the Bengals roster for a couple of years in their practice roster, and for a year and in a couple of training camps. And Eric Tillman wouldn't have traded for him if he thought he wasn't going to be able to play at some point.
Yeah, and we'll see. And that was the one question I had for Brendan Tammon as well is, don't you want to push Patty Neufeld at the right tackle a little bit with somebody like the size of Matt O'Donnell? And we'll see with the depth there. They don't really have Canadian depth at tackle right now, and that's where Matt O'Donnell fits in. It's a debate to be had, and we'll probably have it with our next contestant on the semifinal. But Jason Knox here on the semifinal, coolest job ever, $10,000, trip to the Grey Cup, and this chair that he's sitting in right now. But you were listening last night. You wanted to weigh in on the Darian Durant debate and the support or some lack thereof for the quarterback.
Well, what really gets me as a Rough Rider fan is the fact that people continue to rag on the way that Darian Durant plays and expect him to be at a certain level 4 years starting into this league, have multiple championships, be winning MVP awards, all that stuff. And, like I said before we started here, Jamie, there's only one Warren Moon. And, he was winning multiple championships. That was late 70s, early 80s. Look at guys like Anthony Calvillo. It took him until 2009 just to get his second Grey Cup, his first one coming much earlier in his career in 2002. And he had disappointments along the way. He went 7 years without actually getting to raise that cup over his head. And even guys like Ricky Ray, I know he has multiple championships, but between 2005 and 2010, couldn't get his team a home playoff game and missed the playoffs on 3 occasions. It's just funny that the way that Rider fans seem to look at Darian Durant as this big albatross out there that's not helping us win games, when in fact, if you look at the last 2 weeks, even take the Calgary game, any offense we had in that game was on his shoulders and on his legs, and that was decisiveness, and that's the decisiveness I've been looking for as a guy who compared Henry Burris. That's the type of game he should play, and he's gone out and played that the last 2 weeks, and with that opens things up for the offense. He's able to finally get these running lanes, and then people come open when they have to respect the run. And I think people really need to lay off of Darian Durant because he's the best quarterback we have had here in quite some time. So you can even throw Kerry Joseph into that mix. He's a better quarterback. Joseph was never a franchise quarterback. Darian Durant is. He could spend another 5 or 6 years here and win us a Grey Cup or 2 or 3. He just has to develop that cohesiveness with the people around him. And I think he's starting to find that, at the midway point of this season. Everybody says when Labor Day gets going around, you know what kind of team you have. I don't know if we have a 52-0 team, but we got a team that's getting better.
Glenn, do you have anything, the final question for Jason Knox?
Yeah, I do actually, Jason. I thought that was well said. That when you compare some of the great quarterbacks that we're watching now, guys like Anthony Calvillo, and how long they took to actually get to the level that they're at. And Warren Moon, remember, played behind Tom Wilkinson in Edmonton for a couple of years before he got his opportunity, and they started splitting time. So, there is a learning curve, and it takes some time, and Durant has been knocking on the door early in his career. I would ask you this, though, Jason. Yesterday we had a good comment on email, I believe it was, where a fan said that we're not really, we're not really talking about the main fan base here. That most of the fans are behind Durant, not complaining about him. Do you think that's the case?
That's a tough one because it seems sometimes the most vocal Rider fan is the one that is the fly-by-night Rider fan. So that's the voice that everybody hears. Now, when I get together with friends, people are on Darian's side, but there's also that group of people who, the minute he throws an incompletion or throws behind a receiver, want to get him on the first bus out of town. And again, that's couldn't be any more ridiculous. But I think as Rider Nation, you love them when you win, you hate them when they lose, and it's never going to change. But I think most people will rally around him when things are going the right way.
That's Jason Knox, semifinalist of the coolest job ever. We have another contestant coming up after the break. TJ Karwandi is in. Jason, a job well done. This is the Green Zone on News Talk Radio.